Hello friends, and welcome back to the Mothership. Today we are smoking up our very own ground honey barbecue deer jerky. Let's get started. The first ingredient for any ground jerky is of course your meat. When you're selecting cuts, particularly for beef jerky, your goal is to select something that's leaner than 90%. So 10% fat, 90% lean is probably your starting point. If you can go up to 95, 96, that's better. This is venison, so it's already gonna be super lean. There's no added fat in here, so it's gonna be perfect. I'm doing about 2 pounds. You can change the recipe around to increase it if you're going more or less. So we're going with 2 pounds here. And if you need to learn how to grind your meat, I have plenty of videos making sausages that go over that detail. But this is already pre-ground, as you can tell. This is fairly fresh. This is from a deer that was harvested, I guess about 2 months ago at this point. The first ingredient I'm gonna add in here is salt. When you're doing jerky, the same way I do with my sausages, I weigh my meat in grams and then I calculate how much salt I'm gonna use based on that weight. I try to shoot for about a 2% per pound of meat, which in this case, that's about 1,050 grams is what I weighed it, which is a little over 2 pounds. 2% of that is about 21 grams, so I got 21 grams of salt. Since we're weighing it, doesn't matter what we're using, this is just table salt. I also have my pink salt in there as well, which for 2 pounds is about a half a teaspoon. And I'm gonna go with some black pepper, onion powder, honey granules, paprika, and garlic powder. If you make a lot of my rubs, you'll notice that this seems kind of familiar because this is basically just an offshoot of my honey barbecue rub. It has a good taste to it and it actually works really well for jerky. So what's important here is to get it all mixed together. We want to make sure all of that salt, those nitrates, and all the seasonings are evenly distributed throughout. So I usually just keep folding it inside of itself like so, over and over, till everything is completely mixed together. All that's mixed together. At this point, I am going to cover it and put it in my fridge to allow the cure to start working. We're going to be smoking this down, and it might be in that danger zone for a certain amount of time, so I want to make sure that my cure has started working. It's going to be hard to honestly tell from the sight test just because we're using a pretty red meat as it is, which is venison, but 24 hours until tomorrow when we actually throw it in the smoker, this should be okay. So, cover in the fridge. Meat has had a chance to cure overnight, so now it is time to get it into my jerky gun. You don't necessarily need one of these, you could just lay it out in strips and cut them. This just makes everything a lot more uniform and easy. There's a couple companies that make them. I have the Meet Your Maker products. They tend to work pretty well. Quality's good. I do recommend them. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get our meat and just kind of push it down into the tube here. Now before we started this process, I actually went and got the smoker started. I'm running it at the lowest possible temperature setting, which on mine is about 180 degrees. If you can go lower, that would probably be ideal, 150 to 180. We do have this meat cured, so we don't have to worry about the danger zone. Now for the horn, I'm going with the circular one today for absolutely no reason. I usually do like the strips, but you know what? I've actually never done the little tube, so I'm interested to try something different. So what I'm going to do is just start to do a nice, nasty looking log all the way down. And perfect. Helps to have a knife here, which I don't have obviously. And we're just going to do this and any other rack that needs to be done. Now the perk of using the cannon here, or the gun, or whatever you want to call it, is it makes everything uniform. So in theory, everything should dry out at the same time, which obviously is never going to be the case, just because of heat spots and humidity differences throughout your smoker or your dehydrator, but it should make things a little more uniform. And it's super fun to use. It's just like a caulking gun. With these two racks laid out, it's time to get them onto the smoker. Now I'm going to run, like I said, at 180 degrees, and the goal here really is to just dry them out. They are cured, so you could eat them, honestly, a little under 165, but that is the recommended temperature, so to get them to 165. But what might happen is if there's too much moisture, 165 still might be too much play in there. If you want them drier, you can take them out, let them cool off a bit, and then put them back in, and then keep doing that over and over until you get to the dryness consistency that you're looking for. For me, I'm just going to take them to 165 and then see where we are. I think we should probably be okay. There's not a lot of added extra moisture in here. In fact, none. I didn't use soy sauce this time. And the meat was relatively dry, so I think we should be okay. But let's throw it on there and see how it comes out. And fun fact, we're in the middle of a snowstorm, so this should be interesting. All right. Been on for about an hour and a half. They are probing about 115 right now. They're starting to harden up, which is great, but they definitely need a little more work. A little soft. I love these little racks, by the way. If you have this particular grill, I highly recommend the jerky racks. They make stuff like this for chicken wings. Pretty great. Oh, and if you're not from New England, this is what we have to deal with out here. Lovely, huh? It's been about 4 hours at this point, and I think these are done. They're probably around 160, but most importantly, they seem nice and dry. They're bending pretty well, but not really breaking. I think they're ready to go. I actually just ate a piece of one. That's where I want it to be. So what I'm gonna do now is take them inside, let them cool off, and then you know what? We'll see how we did. After smoking these for about 3 to 4 hours, I brought them inside. I've allowed them to completely cool off for about an hour or so. They are nice and dry, which means we can check the bend. Bends, breaks, looks perfect to me. Here's what the inside looks like if you're interested. But most importantly, how do they taste? Let's find out. Perfect. These have dehydrated to the point that I want them to be, so I can cut them up, store them, do whatever I want to do with them. They have been cured, so they don't need to sit in the refrigerator. These are shelf stable for probably a while. Now, I did probe them before I took them off. They were actually about 160, so not quite that 165. But honestly, they've been dehydrated. They have been cured. And I processed this particular deer myself, so I know that it was done in a pretty clean environment. So I'm actually not worried about anything nasty getting into the meat. Now, as far as taste and texture is great for these. Like I said earlier, I usually do them in the strips, but I wanted to try the, I don't know, I guess you can call them the tube-shaped ones. And the consistency is pretty good. You've got a softer interior with a little bit of harder exterior. I do like this. As far as taste, this is honey barbecue style, but it is not overly sweet, which is one of my bigger concerns when you're having something that indicates that it might be on the sweet side for a jerky. I like my jerky to be less sweet, more savory. Now, as far as your personal preference, if you want it to be sweeter, you can obviously add in some sugar or even more honey. And if you want some more salt in there, you can add more salt or reduce. This is the 2%. This is a good starting point if it's your first time making jerky, and especially ground jerky. I try not to add in any extra moisture. If you're doing traditional jerky where you're cutting strips, I'm marinating it, but I don't have as much moisture getting into the meat because I'm just gonna take that marinade off when I'm actually dehydrating it. When you're doing ground, I don't like to add in a whole bunch of extra moisture because it makes it harder to dehydrate. So I try to get all of my salt less from like a soy sauce that a lot of people use and just from traditional salt. And then I try to use dry ingredients, like those honey granules are great instead of just using liquid honey. Either way, guys, this is your first time making jerky, absolutely give this a try. You don't need to use venison, you can use beef, you can use pork, you can use any game meat, you can use just about anything. Turkey jerky is a thing, but I always have a lot of deer, and this is a great way to use it. If you guys end up giving this a try, please let me know down below what your thoughts are. And as always, guys, cook something fantastic, and I'll see you on the next cook. Bye-bye.